Happy Tuesday, everybody. Every Tuesday, I like to go over the community deck tech submissions, and this week we got 3. So the first one on the list here is Blossoming Sultai by Thumblewine Brews, and this list was at least claimed to successfully be piloted to Mythic, and I believe it. Looking over it, it looks like a solid strategy. So we've got a lot of self-mill, so we've got the Blanchwood Prowler. You could also run something like Cash Grab, I think. Could be a possibility here, but something to kind of fill the graveyard. The Aftermath Analyst also filling the graveyard with some mill. We've also got the Rin and Realm Breaker, which can mill, and we've also got the Lumra, which can mill and then bring all the lands back into play, and the Blossoming Tortoise, which the deck is named after. Also giving you the activated lands cost 1 less to activate, which works with the Restless Cottage and the other Restless land, the Restless Vinestalk. So what's nice about this sort of thing is that the Golgari strategy tends to be a little bit weak to Wraths, right? Sunfalls, Temporary Lockdown, that sort of thing. And this gets around that because of being able to use your lands that aren't hit by the Wraths, right? So at the beginning of combat on your turn, you can attack them with a land that has flying, and then where its power is X is the number of cards in your hand, and then whenever a land creature you control deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. So this giving you additional resources. If we do fall behind as we are kind of developing the board, we've got the Terror Tide as the Wrath of choice. You could also run like a Deadly Cover-Up, but this gets around Indestructible, which we don't have to worry about too much in Standard. But you're descending well in this deck, so you should be able to wrath the board and it's 1 cheaper than Deadly Cover-Up. So I like the inclusion here. And we've got Shieldred, which is a nice stabilizing force against the early aggression. The thing that this doesn't have is an answer for like a turn 3, Slick Shot Show Off, but that's why we're running this in best of 3. So this is not a best of 1 list, this is a best of 3 list, and in best of 3, you're not going to come up against the Slick Shot Show Off kind of pace as often. There is still the Gruul aggro, and we're going to start seeing that maybe come up in a little, be played a little bit more often, which then you might want to be thinking about, like, instead of like the Corrupted Conviction or, I think there's some room in this to potentially throw in some instant speed interaction to counteract that, but I don't think it's super necessary, depending on the matchups you're experiencing in best of 3. Spinewind's Armadillo also helps against stabilizing against the early pressure while also doing the ramp thing, and then giving us additional stuff in our graveyard to fuel the Descend. We've got the Honest Rutstein for bringing things back and then making our creatures cost less. We've got decent fixing for the 3-color space too, because we've got the 4 copies of the Armored Scrap Gorger, and the Rin and Realm Breaker makes it so that our lands tap for Rainbow. The Haywire Might also gives us that artifact and enchantment hate while also giving us some life stabilization. So I really like where this is going, and I feel like it's well designed. I agree with the land count, and the land distribution feels about right, because you are only running the 1 blue for Voice of Zhalfir, and you have lots of ways to pump the blue sources up from 8. And similarly, I don't think that you're going to get too punished by running the 25 lands. I've seen some of the decks that are more centered strictly on land count in your graveyard lean even towards like 26, 27, but I don't think it's necessary. And the one card that I thought would fit into this deck that would be kind of I might play around with it a little bit is the Glarb. So if you look at the Sultai mid-range deck that I talked about that took down a top 3 in last weekend's standard challenge, you might get some ideas there, right? Because you're doing more of a base green, so I don't think it makes sense to bring in Vryn and not really doing a whole lot of like copying creatures in the graveyard kind of strategy, although it would have a payoff if you ran more of the Spinewoods Armadillo. But that being said, the thing that I have the most questions about are the sideboard. So we've got a couple of, like the 4th copy of the Haywire Might, that's fine. Pick Your Poison. I actually kind of want to see more Pick Your Poisons, depending on how much you're coming up against Domain. The Runes Recluse is the one where I really want to know Thimblewine Brews. What were you bringing this in for? What matchup do you like this one in? Because this isn't a sideboard that we typically see. So that one was a little bit of a head scratcher. Cease and Desist is fine, gives us a little bit of graveyard hate, and then in a pinch, if we're coming up against a very heavy artifacts or enchantments, it works. Could also do maybe with a little bit more on the Choking Miasma. I know that if we are playing up against a really fast strategy like the Rakdos Lizards, I think could be kind of difficult for this deck, and so I would kind of want to see maybe a little bit more of the Choking Miasma to hate on the decks that struggle with the 2 toughness hate, and but you know, got one in there. The Tranquil Thrillback makes sense against stabilization against mono red, as well as giving you artifact and enchantment hate. And then we've got the Cryptic Coat, which is a pretty good answer if your opponent is wrathing the board a lot. Obstinate Baloth for the discard strategies. Fecund Greenshell I thought was an interesting sideboard inclusion. I'm not really sure when you would bring this in instead of just starting it in the main. And this may have been in there just as like this would be a cool one of to put in maybe over the Spinewoods Armadillo or something like that. But that's another one that's a head scratcher, right? So the Ruins Recluse, the Fecund Greenshell, and then the Goldvein Hydra. The Goldvein Hydra is also another one where I don't really see the advantage of running a one of in the sideboard, other than it could just be a fun alternative one that kind of fits into the deck. So I'd probably play around with replacing those 4 with, you know, probably more copies of Pick Your Poison and Choking Miasma, just personally. And then I was happy to see the Demolition Field, because technically this is a little bit shy on where I want the lands that I would like to have. So having the ability to bring in the sideboard of the Demolition Field is something that you'll see a lot. Play versus draw, where when you're on the draw, you don't need as many lands, and then when you're on the play, you could bring in the Demolition Field to kind of up the land count, and also gives you an answer if they have a problematic threat. So thanks for sharing it, though. Not really got a whole lot of suggestions here, and I did pass over Nissa Ascended Animus is also a good one to include for the artifact enchantment hate and the overrun effect if we're having trouble getting through their defenses. So thanks for sharing. Second up on the list is Bristly Counters by D16, and this one is limited by the collection. They put an asterisk of like, this is, you know, I'm doing what I'm doing because of this is what I got, right? And they had recently just gotten the 4th copy of the Innkeeper's Talent, and so I just want to talk a little bit about where I've seen the most success for the Celestia counter space. The archetype is, I think, never going to be fully a competitive archetype because of how poorly it does against Wraths, right? Like, even in bringing in the 2 Archangel Elspeth, like, if you have a really board-centric strategy like this, you're just innately going to be kind of weak to Wraths, right? The other thing I think is, right now you're leaning on some of the budget lands that make it so that you have a fair amount of tap lands. And ultimately, if we're going to try to beat Sunfall, our best option is to try to race it. So I really think that, you know, the next crafts should probably be like the Blossoming Sands, anything to give you that better, the better fixing. You actually have 3 of these. Not Blossoming Sands. I'm blanking on the name. The Painland, right? Get some of the fast and slow lands in here instead of as many tap lands. Because right now you're running the Pop Hatch Recruit and Razor Verge Thicket. Not Razor Verge Thicket. Why can't I think of the name of the Painland? Anyway, sorry about that. The Pop Hatch Recruit is your only turn 1, and it has offspring, so you can even play it as a turn 3. So with the current curve, I see what you're thinking. Like, we'll play tap lands on turn 1, and then by turn 3, we'll be able to finagle into actually deploying our threats. And you know, you're making it work, but I think ultimately to make it more competitive, you're going to want to lower that curve, right? Just a couple of thoughts on the lands currently as they are. So you've got 15 white and 19 green, and the triple pip on Tribute to the World Tree is going to be difficult to do with that land. You'd really want to get that green count up to 23. So if you do get the upside as well of crafting the Pain lands, is you'd be able to actually get up to being able to more realistically cast this on turn 3. And this is that type of card where you want to get it down on turn 3 so that you can then eventually, you know, get the payoff of the card draw off of it. And yeah, it just helps build your board, right? Archangel Elspeth also would like 16 sources of white, so you're close again. If you added just in a little bit more fixing, then you wouldn't have as difficult a time casting that, and sometimes it's going to be a brick in your hand. Not too big of a deal. There are a couple of cards though that I just want you to be aware of, because I think there's definitely some stuff that is being explored but hasn't really become very mainstream with this archetype that are kind of fun, right? And they're not particularly expensive. They're not rares. So the Enduring Bond Warden is a way to give you that like +1/+1 backup counter. And then if you have a gratuitous amount of counters on something that dies, being able to shift those over, I think, is reasonably appealing. Helps you kind of get over like the 1/1 Death Touch and mono black, that sort of thing. Nurturing Pixie, I think, actually plays pretty well in the counter space as long as you're going to up the amount of 1-drops and get rid of the tap lands that you're running. So like Sunshower Druid that we got in Bloomburrow, I think is a particularly interesting one to bounce to your hand and then gain that 1 life as well. Helps give you some stabilization, as well as a flyer that can help be an evasive threat to put your counters on with the Innkeeper's Talent and such. Snakeskin Veil, I think, would really help with this sort of strategy, the board-centric strategy. If you're not getting hit by the counter spells, it's still nice to be able to have an answer for the single-point removal. So I think I would try to figure out a way to get like 2 or 3 copies of Snakeskin Veil in there, just so that we can protect our kind of like key pieces from removal. The Dusk Legion Duelist is a way to kind of get some card draw into the deck. So if you decide that the triple pip green is a little bit too much to have in a 2-color deck, Dusk Legion Duelist, I think, is a very common one for the Celestia counter space, and could definitely be explored. The Bloated Contaminator is one that I think I'd like to see over the Scrap Shooter. Again, I guess it depends on how many wild cards you're willing to sink into this strategy. But the proliferation with this sort of board that has a whole bunch of +1/+1 counters can really take off. Whereas this is kind of giving you that artifact or enchantment hate, and then being a 4/4 for 4 or 4/4 for 3 with reach. It's definitely not a bad card, but I do think that the trample, especially on the Bloated Contaminator, prevents you from getting like chump blocked, right? So personally, I've been exploring doing the Bloated Contaminator a little bit, and Clay Champion, I think, is another one too that I want to see somebody get it to work, right? Is like Celestia Counters has been sitting in the background kind of waiting for the cards to make it possible. And I think that, you know, you're close to it here. I think that with a couple of tweaks, you could have a pretty competitive Celestia deck, as long as you feel like you can kind of consistently race the Sunfall on turn 5. So, Brushland, there we go. I have it in the sideboard. This is the one I was talking about, the Painland Brushland. I would try to get that in there somewhere. So thank you for your submission there, D16. Or maybe I'll pull up my sideboard ideas before I start talking about the deck. All right, so the third one here is Simic Unblockable by Timback Trucking. And this one's another one it's a work in progress. Currently, it's not doing particularly well, but the strategy is there, and it feels close to being something, at least according to Timback Trucking. And I think I agree. I think that there's a couple of cards that I think would fit well into this archetype that we're not currently running. So I talked a little bit already with Timback about Cryptic Coat, and this one, the deck is struggling a little bit with Wraths, and then the Cryptic Coat would be able to kind of get around the temporary lockdown, be able to return it in play to kind of give you this recurring threat that's a little bit more difficult for Control to answer outside of the artifact hate. And so I think we should probably try to squeeze this in, especially because with the 22 lands, I think you can afford to go a little bit further up the curve, or you could drop a couple of lands. Like, I think this is a little bit on the high side. Like I would probably run this at 20. Just looking at it, maybe 20 is... I think you could even do 19, but I would try it out with 20, because some of these spree cards are kind of expensive. But on that note, I do think that 3 steps ahead, I'd probably be running the Repulsive Mutation over, just because it fits into the... So the issue that I have with this deck right now is the pace of, like, our unblockable creatures are hitting them, but they're 1/1s and they're 2/2s, and I guess the Surge Engine's a little bit bigger, but still not I'd like to turn up the clock a little bit, which is why like Audacity could be a good one. But the Repulsive Mutation allows you to give that counterspell of preventing them from playing the Wrath while simultaneously making your unblockable creature into a larger threat that puts them on a faster clock. So I think I'd explore that one. Tail Swipe I also think would be nice to get kind of some instant speed interaction, because right now the only interaction really is the Longstock Brawl, other than defensive spells like the Snakeskin Veil and the Shore Up. So I just like the Tail Swipe more than I do the Longstock Brawl. It's not going to give you that +1/+1 counter permanently, but I don't really like gifting them a 1/1 to get the +1/+1 counter. And then it also gives you that instant speed. So personally, that might be biased, but I would probably be running the Tail Swipes over the Longstock Brawl. And then we could... So Ginger Brute is not technically unblockable unless you've got the mana to continuously make it unblockable, right? And I was thinking I'd play around with the idea of maybe replacing them with Mockingbirds, just because you can then make... You know, copy something that's a little bit more... doesn't have that repeatable mana sink. Now... You do have a little bit of that like Simic Cookies vibe, where you do have the Ginger Brute and the Surge Engine, which could work nicely with the Machine Over Matter. So if you do decide to run the Machine Over Matter, I wouldn't cut the Ginger Brutes, but I would be bringing in either Machine Over Matter or the Unauthorized Exit, just as a way so that we can bounce a temporary lockdown and get our unblockable creatures back. We bounce it on their turn, so they don't have summoning sickness, we can immediately attack with them, right? So I think that this sort of deck, it also helps improve the matchup against like mono red, but being able to bounce their stuff, I think I would like to see maybe a little bit more interaction than just the Tail Swipes. But you can't afford to go too much because of how much other stuff you've got in here that are specifically for targeting and saving your dudes. So I do agree with the low creature count, since we're going to try to protect them. I think 4 Shore Up and 4 Snakeskin Veil is probably a little bit too high. I would play around with dropping the Shore Up specifically, because the Snakeskin Veil leaves you that counter, which helps beef up the unblockable creature. But another thing to think about is potentially Tyvar's Stand. If they're playing Wraths outside of Sunfall and outside of Temporary Lockdown, like the Deadly Cover-Ups, like the ones that actually destroy the board, then Tyvar's Stand can give you that Indestructible, which I feel like this deck would benefit over the Shore Up, right? So also you could make your mana base more mainly green and move away from a perfectly equal split, and that could be beneficial. If all of your turn 1, or your 1-cost cards were green, for example. Something to consider. And so I'd be probably playing the Tyvar Stand over the Shore Up, and I might be playing a 3 Snakeskin Veil, 3 Tyvar Stand, just as kind of like my initial thought of where I'd start. And yeah, the other thing too is I'd probably up the Botanical Sanctums. I don't know, if you're limited on this, I would bring this all the way up to 4. And I would also play around with dropping 2 lands, so running 20 with the Botanical Sanctums up to 4. And then you mentioned that you were also struggling with the go wide strategies like Celestia Rabbits and Boros Convoke. And sadly, there's not a particularly great answer for the... there's not a great answer for Simic for that strategy outside of Consuming Tides. So I think it's called Consuming Tides. Or do we lose Consuming Tide? There is one I think that bounces all of the permanents, but I wouldn't bring it in unless you were going to play this deck in best of 3, because it's not good to have outside of those matchups. So I assume this was built for best of 1, but if you're playing it in best of 3, I think it's called Consuming Tide, and maybe I just misspelled it. Something like that gives you that bounce is really all I've seen for Simic. So hope these all find you well, give you good ideas. I love nerding out about Magic the Gathering, so thank you for sharing your decks. And if you would like feedback next week about your own brews, look for the Community Deck Tech submission in the Community tab over here on YouTube. And have a wonderful week. I'm not exactly sure what my scheduling is going to allow me to do. I'll try to get some gameplay videos in here if I can fit it, but otherwise I will see you at least on next Monday for the Best of 1, Best of 3 meta review. And take care, everybody.